All right, I think it is time to begin. We have a good group on today to talk about Shopify, Gatsby making money. Exciting talk we have for you today. You will be hosted by myself, Dan Giordano. I run product marketing at Gatsby, and Jack Selwood, who is our product manager on the integration and collaboration squad, which really works with a lot of our partnering vendors. A little housekeeping quickly to start off. The webinar will be recorded, and we're definitely going to send an email in the next 48 hours. So if you have to go during the middle, don't worry, we're going to get you a copy of this. We will be answering live questions though throughout the webinar. So feel free to ask those questions in the questions tab, and we'll get to them either in the chat. So definitely check the answers out there, or again at the end, we'll be answering some live. All right, so what are we covering today? We're covering Gatsby basics, Shopify basics. We're talking about headless e-commerce, and then we're really talking about how they work together best to create more revenue for you, to make your business more optimized, and make a better user experience for your ultimate customers. So quick ad on both Gatsby and Shopify, set us up with some context. Gatsby is how modern development teams build amazing websites. Gatsby provides an open source framework, a plugin marketplace, and a cloud platform to help businesses build fast, secure, and beautiful websites. We were born in 2015. That was our first repo that we added. We have over 50 million downloads at this point. And I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we crossed 50,000 GitHub stars. So we've been a wildly popular open source framework. And since 2015, we've added over 2,500 plugins to make building websites easier, and a cloud platform with a CI/CD engine and a global edge network to provide users, developers with the best Gatsby experience. Speaking of large, successful projects, kind of the star of today's show is Shopify. Shopify has been wildly popular since its inception in 2004. At this stage, they have over 500,000 active businesses and stores built on the Shopify platform, and they did over 36 billion in sales just last quarter. So users selling on their platform sold $36 billion worth of goods. So as you'll see, it's kind of the anti-Amazon. It allows business owners to build their own store. And this is why Shopify rules, right? Whoops, sorry about that. They made selling items online simple. They don't have huge exorbitant fees that Amazon does. They have their own store templates. They have product catalog management, shopping cart, payment processing, promotional tools, all built into one pretty easy to use platform, and one that's been really popular since, again, 2004, when Tobias Luka, he wanted to go sell a snowboard online, and the tools around him were difficult to use. So it's kind of the famous founding story of Shopify. And you'll see, again, to get set up, create your own Amazon, really simple. To become the next sockpreneur, sell shoes, sell socks, sell anything that you can make yourself. You can wholesale. Shopify just made that incredibly easy. And then there's entire dashboards, promotional activities, marketing tools that, again, can help you increase revenue. It was the first one to really all be built into one interface. When we think back in the day, I think Magento was probably the biggest way to actually bring products online and sell them. Magento is still around, but Shopify has certainly taken the market share. All right, so after all the good things about Shopify, I'm sure we're all familiar with Shopify on the call today. What are some of the drawbacks of Shopify that we'll try to solve in general with the Gatsby and Shopify partnership? Performance, poor performance for large stores. Shopify suffers from many of the same performance and speed problems that any other monolithic app is going to have. A lot of things are happening when the Shopify store loads. You have a lot of services all kind of coming from one database and one source. So again, performance is always kind of going to be a bottleneck. The other thing is control. A lot of users of Shopify often hit bottlenecks around customization. They kind of have to hack some things together. You'll see that we'll talk about a lot. If you have different CMSs or blog to go with your store, a lot of that integration doesn't happen too seamlessly. And then developer experience. Shopify was really built for a simple solution for marketers and non-technical like business owners, store owners, kind of your mom and pop shop. It wasn't really built for developers who have the tools and the technology that they want to use and kind of the skills they need to express. Shopify doesn't make that particularly easy. So from Shopify, we're going to transition into a little bit of headless e-commerce. I'm going to ask Jack to go through a little bit. What are the differences between the traditional e-commerce platforms and maybe the headless e-commerce solution that we have today, or that are becoming more popular today?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Dan. So with a traditional e-commerce site, maybe you're with Shopify, for example, for developers, that means working within Shopify Liquid templates, maybe not having some of the version control or DevOps that you're used to working with other platforms. But again, as Dan mentioned, as a site administrator or as a business owner, you get everything all in one place. You get a website, you get a product catalog, all of that in one place. And maybe to get started, that works for you. But as your business grows, as your needs become more sophisticated, you start to realize, wow, I really want more control over the checkout experience, or I want to enrich in my product catalog, or maybe let's add some marketing automation for things like abandoned cart recovery, or follow-up emails after new orders are placed. And headless e-commerce unlocks all of that. It allows you to bring together all these disparate tools from different places. We'll dig into this a little bit more, but it gives you that optionality, so you can swap in services and tools as your business evolves. I was chatting with a friend recently, and they're working at a high growth startup, and they were telling me that their software stack is completely changing every 12 to 18 months. And so a headless e-commerce setup and platform enables you to continue to grow.
Definitely. And I think there's a couple of examples where a headless experience really makes a ton of sense. The control and the business flexibility, I think, is definitely one, like you were talking about. If you are in a fast-paced startup, if you're moving quickly, it is a lot easier to roll with a headless solution. You can kind of take your point solutions in and out. You don't have to be locked into one ecosystem. Another good example is when performance really matters. You can think about these really highly competitive online spaces, things like online furniture, any of those really cutthroat businesses where organic listings, where performance is really going to matter. A headless solution is usually, in almost every case, going to give you that special leg up. The other example is like internationalization and localization. Headless e-commerce gives you a way to kind of abstract a lot of the content pieces, a lot of the, again, the product SKU management, and create a layer in between that makes internationalization, localization of the website, of the content on the page itself, a lot simpler than traditional e-commerce platforms. I think you're kind of locked into a lot of language like limitations that you'll get in some of these platforms where you don't have that limitation when you go headless. And then lastly, kind of an example of the Frankenstein website where you have multiple CMSs, and those CMSs live on maybe different subdomains, or you have this really hacky way to get them to work together. But we're seeing that proliferate in the marketplace today, where organizations have maybe a blog that they really focus on and they want to start selling more items, or they have a headless CMS like Contentful powering maybe marketing pages or further content. These things really work together better in a headless environment. And luckily, Shopify can be run headless. And you'll see that when Shopify and Gatsby work together, they create this environment where you can integrate your entire headless stack. So Gatsby here has a combo of backend services that can be powered from anything like analytics tools like Segment, CMSs like Contentful, e-commerce platforms here, Shopify, and they all work together in concert with the Gatsby framework to create one unified data layer that can then be statically generated to create a fast performant front end. So this is where the headless part comes in, where you're decoupling those backend services you're not using, or you're no longer using the Shopify front end. The website is actually coming from Gatsby. Same thing with Contentful or WordPress. The front end is not the CMS itself, as traditional like WordPress would be, but the front end is coming from this highly optimized Gatsby framework, and that can be run on the Gatsby cloud in an Edge CDN, again, for faster performance when all of that matters. Also, you can control, sorry, Jack, go for it.
I was going to add one thing. So one thing to point out here, maybe some use case stuff is, we're showing Contentful and Segment on the screen. As your Shopify store grows, why does that matter? Well, you might want to get more sophisticated with your marketing content. Maybe you want to create landing pages that, focus on specific product lines you have. Contentful provides much more expanded functionality around the types of content you can model and that your content editors can work with. For Segment, for example, you can become more sophisticated as a business to understand user behaviors and how they're engaging with your store and your products. So this is just becoming, sort of a more well-rounded commerce business and adding more capabilities to continue to see growth and work with your customers.
Exactly, and Gatsby makes that easy with two kind of starting points. Today, we'll mostly focus on the Gatsby Source Shopify plugin, which Jack will be kind of walking through at the end here. But we also have a Gatsby starter or a Shopify-centered starter. So that we did in a live stream last week. It's a really great way to get up and running on e-commerce really quickly with both Gatsby and Shopify kind of built in as starting like foundations. And then just quickly, we'll walk through kind of each of the quick benefits of Gatsby plus Shopify. There's two that we're going to dive into deeper that we really think are important today to store owners. But the first one is faster page load speed. Again, Gatsby is optimized. It's a statically generated framework. It's going to have the fastest preloaded, pre-fetched images, content, and your store is going to be much smoother, much faster performance. That actually is going to help not only conversions, but it's also going to help increase your SEO traffic. Google cares a lot about speed, about the experience the end user is going through. They've also come out with a couple of ways to measure that, which we'll actually tackle in a slide in a bit. But again, with a faster performance, you can actually generate more organic traffic, which is the cheapest, I think, best way to sell online. You'll also be able to ship features faster. So when you go headless, you'll kind of get thrown into, hopefully, a nice agile development phase where your developers will be able to work on sprints, will be able to decouple the actual product additions with features and front end work. So your storefront can get changed on daily while your product and SKU and back end, maybe that will go through a longer cycle, or maybe the reverse, where you need to make updates to the back end. You can do that without disrupting your front end experience, which is tough to do when your front end and back end are coupled together. You can also integrate your favorite CMS easily, like we talked about before. Contentful, WordPress, whatever you'd like from a CMS perspective, can sit alongside your Shopify product catalog in a way that Shopify just doesn't really allow. Not only will you be able to curve down like your subdomains and put everything on one domain, your pages can also be richer. You can have that content, you can have reviews, you can have all these different systems right there on one page from different services and a single unified front end. Also, because of the static nature of the Gatsby website, customer data is completely separated from your front end. So the front end can't be queried, you can't reach the database behind it because it's actually already been preloaded, which really lowers your attack surface. So the chances of you getting your customer data getting hacked with decoupled headless e-commerce drops drastically. And lastly, with Gatsby, you get out of the box PWA functionality. So what do I mean by PWA? Progressive web apps. They are technology that makes websites kind of next level on a mobile device. They're as close as you can get to mobile app development without actually having to go hire a mobile development team. You'll be able to hook into things like offline mode, where the Safari browser or the Chrome browser on Android loads up all that content. If you go on a subway, let's say, you'll still be able to make interactions with the website itself. Also, things like push notifications inside the dropdown on a mobile phone, or bookmarks on your homepage. These are all things that are kind of, again, they're like Web 3.0. They're their next level of functionality. They can make the experience with your online store really nice for the end user. And then how does Gatsby continue to help drive more revenue? I think the first thing is, I think Jack's going to take, where again, we're expounding on this creatively highlight your products in a way that Shopify itself just doesn't allow.
Absolutely. So if you've built a Shopify site before, you'll know their liquid templating engine pretty well. If you maybe use Squarespace's developer platform, it's a little bit similar to that. And this is not the way that developers traditionally work when they're building out websites. And there isn't version control. You can't use the CI/CD of your choice. You can't use components or React or sort of those modern technologies that allow you to build really rich experiences. And so by going headless and pairing Shopify with Gatsby, you can build out these beautiful product pages. If you think about the things that Shopify does really well, it's things like checkout, order fulfillment, payment management. But the things that users primarily interact with as they're searching or navigating your site is in individual product pages. And so those are the types of pages that are best served by Gatsby because of the blazing fast speeds. And then as a developer or a designer, you get a ton of control over how that product data and content is actually displayed. And ultimately, all of that is leading towards more conversions. We see that when people go headless, they typically see about a 30% improvement to conversion rates. So there's a real impact when you improve the experience of viewing and exploring products on your site. And Gatsby helps you deliver that.
Awesome. You can see here, I think this website is a good example. This is actually one web page. It was too long and too rich to actually take a screenshot of the entire thing, but I cut it up, and you can see that it's just so much more than the actual product experience in the shopping cart. It has expanded related things. It has this cuts comparison, which again is very interactive. It's built with JavaScript, and it just creates that shopping experience that really makes you relate and have this emotional connection to this cuts clothing when you're on the website. The next thing that, of course, all business owners love is more organic traffic. And I think that's another way where headless e-commerce comes in, especially around Gatsby. We're built out of the box to help boost SEO performance by kind of checking the boxes and getting better Core Web Vitals scores. So we just ran a presentation on Core Web Vitals. It's a new way for Google to now demonstrably measure the actual user experience and kind of rate that against the website, use it in their algorithm to rank. But it's becoming a larger piece of the puzzle, and it's getting rolled out June 1st. So it's right around the corner. It will increasingly be more of a signal for Google. So it'll be more of an onus on you to get out there and make sure that these scores are better. So we'll just quickly go through them and how they relate to kind of an e-commerce experience. The largest contentful paint, that is the actual HTML, CSS, JavaScript getting loaded onto the website itself. We'll talk about how we can delay that a little bit. We can minimize scripts. We can delay third-party scripts getting loaded themselves. But this is kind of the first order of SEO performance. And Gatsby, again, is optimized to do this. You can think about a large shopping catalog. We'll have that condense, optimize to load, and that'll give you a largest contentful paint. The next thing is first input delay. This is kind of the interactivity with the website. You can load all the images and all the text you want, but can I interact with the site? Can I click a button? Can I actually use JavaScript? So that's the next piece kind of that layer of Core Web Vitals that we're really optimized for. And then the last one is actually, I think, the easiest ones for us to relate with. It's the cumulative layout shift. So once everything's already loaded, once you can click, does anything else happen? do images shift in like large hacky ways? Do ads pop up? Do promotional things happen? These are kind of all things that Google is traditionally or trying to further investigate and wrap into their algorithm to make the experience for the end user, which again is your shopper, better, because they're ultimately coming from Google. So these three things are kind of the new buckets of how we can measure SEO performance. And again, Gatsby comes out of the box optimized to really improve scores for you. All right, so now we've kind of gone through everything. I think lighter at the top of kind of an overview of Shopify and Gatsby. I'm going to turn it over to Jack now to kind of walk through the more nitty-gritty details of the Gatsby Shopify source plugin, the recent addition to our plugin marketplace.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Dan. So Shopify and Gatsby.
Yep, you there, Jack? Anyone can hear, let me know. Jack, we lost your audio.
Bigger and bigger businesses building with Shopify and Gatsby.
Hey, Jack,
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you just cut out for a little bit there. Can you actually just start this entire slide over? And I think we're good.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and I'm now seeing all the questions coming through chat. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now. That sounds good.
Okay, great. Awesome. So for those of you that maybe didn't hear me the entire time, we've had some fantastic years partnering with Shopify and seeing what type of sites can be built with Shopify and Gatsby, but we wanted to push ourselves even further. And so that meant scaling up well beyond maybe what our customers needed and supporting at least 50,000 products and seeing reliable and consistent build times with a store that has 50,000 products. We also heard from developers that Shopify has a lot of APIs for fetching product content, interacting with their platform. And maybe it's a little cumbersome and rough around the edges to do that. And so we want to try and abstract away and make it much easier to work with Shopify's API. And then finally, it's not just developers that are building these sites, it's also content editors and store managers. And so we wanted to make it easier for them to be able to preview their content. And so we've been working this year on a brand new version of our Shopify integration, Gatsby Source Shopify. And for the first time, really the thing that unlocks a bunch of new functionality with this integration is bringing incremental builds to our Shopify integration for the first time. This unlocks CMS preview, and it also means that when you make a simple product change, you don't have to wait for your entire site to rebuild, and it just gives you build times that are so much faster just making a small product change. It also means that you can preview what your site will actually look like, for example, changing a price or maybe making a product title or description a little bit longer or tweaking that. You'll be able to simulate what it will look like on Gatsby Cloud. And then finally, when you do make product changes or when you make content edits into Shopify, you need to rebuild those pages. And that typically has required, manually configuring webhooks and manually connecting Shopify with Gatsby Cloud. And we completely automated that away. And so within the data sources section on Gatsby Cloud, you can now, with just a couple of clicks, automatically connect Gatsby Cloud to Shopify so that your site is automatically rebuilt as quickly as possible, between Gatsby Cloud and Shopify. So what does this look like in practice? This means that from a cold build for a simple product change, instead of 132 seconds on, for example, a 500 product site, it takes 8 seconds. Dan, if you want to go to the next slide, that's mind-blowingly faster. That's actually 16 times faster. So what that means, again, is if you make a small product change or maybe add a new product or tweak your product catalog, that change is now 16 times faster compared to a cold build. So this completely unlocks new workflows and functionality for devs that are working locally or for content editors as they manage their site. It also means that working with other source plugins or working with other CMS integrations, Shopify is no longer slowing down your build process. Generally, the slowest I guess the slowest source plugin you're using is going to slow down your overall build process. And so this kind of brings Shopify up to what people have come to expect from our other source plugins and integrations like Contentful or WordPress. We've seen sites that have 10,000 products make a product tweak again in about a minute, so much faster than before. And even if you're a cold build, so building your Gatsby site completely from scratch, you're still going to see about an 18% improvement because we're working with Shopify's APIs more efficiently. And again, the end result is you can build larger stores, and Gatsby's framework can scale alongside you as your store grows.
All right, I think that is the end of the presentation. So I think now we'll take some questions. If that's okay with you, Jack, does that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been seeing everyone's questions come in, so I took a few down that we can start with, and I'll also try and keep track of new ones that come in. So one question was, is headless e-commerce more expensive than traditional e-commerce? So if you purely look from like a monthly spend perspective, you are going to be using more apps and tools. So for example, you'll be hosting your front end on Gatsby Cloud, you'll be building your site on Gatsby Cloud. There's typically some upfront costs associated with hiring a development team to build your site. But the result is, as a business, the ROI is significantly higher. And as I mentioned earlier, we've seen on the low end a 30% improvement to conversions, all the way up to a two times improvement to conversions. And so going headless is definitely a decision to say, hey, we want to deliver a richer, better experience, a more performant experience that makes it easier for our users to engage with our products. And making that decision, right, you'll see business revenue, you'll see growth come from that. And so it's definitely a growth play. It's definitely a decision you make saying, okay, we're ready to take our site and take our e-commerce business to the next level. If you have, maybe significant hosting costs because you're with another headless platform with Gatsby, everything is statically generated ahead of time. So you don't have to use like a bigger and bigger server as your site grows. With our Edge network on Gatsby Cloud, and our hosting partnership with Fastly, you'll pay for requests and visits, but you're not going to pay, for every single visitor that visits your site. It's a lot more economical to serve static sites from the edge. Dan, is there anything you wanted to add there?
No, I was just going to say that too. I think maybe upfront cost might be slightly higher, but in the end, it's going to be a much cheaper solution, especially once you get built out. To your point about the Edge network, CDN is going to cost far less, especially as you scale up. So it's always a good idea, I think, from a operational standpoint, to move that over as quickly as possible.
Absolutely, and if we think about where people are buying things, right? They're buying it on their mobile phones. Maybe they're walking outside, or as people start to kind of return back into the world in an Uber, and having that edge network and having a low latency connection back to your site is so important, so people can actually engage with your site.
All right, I have a question. Can we use imagery from Cloudinary or other sources on PDPs instead of Shopify images?
Awesome question. So one of the major benefits of Gatsby is we have built into the core framework this technology called the content mesh. And so you heard us talk about source plugins earlier. If you're not familiar with source plugins are ways of getting data or content from other sources into Gatsby's data layer. And what that means is that you can pull together content from multiple sources. So on GatsbyJS.com alone, for example, we're using Contentful, WordPress, Shopify, and a few other data sources to seamlessly stitch all that together. So I know Cloudinary has a source plugin for pulling all of your Cloudinary images in. You can absolutely pair that with the Shopify source plugin. And if you even had other integrations or other data sources you wanted to pull together, there's probably a source plugin for that. There's an ecosystem of over 2,000 plugins, many of which are source plugins, so you can quickly bring all of your existing content together.
All right, what other questions did you have, Jack, written down? We have a lot of questions, so we'll try to get to all of them. But also we've been pretty good about big ones we'll throw on Twitter, and we'll try to answer there. And if not, we will definitely get back to you directly on email as well, if it's like a super specific question. But all of them seem pretty good today.
So another one I had, and this is a common one that we get, is do you need a specific plan on Shopify for building a headless Shopify site? No, you do not. However, for higher end plans like Shopify Plus, you do have access to higher API limits. So, general rule of thumb is the larger your product catalog, the higher plan you'll have with Shopify. For some reason, if you're on a smaller plan and you have a ton of products, you might hit some API limits and builds might fail. But we've generally seen, like if you're on Shopify Lite, for example, and you only have a couple of products, that will work great out of the box with the Gatsby Source Shopify plugin. We had another question here. What about Gatsby Source Shopify Experimental? So for those of you that attended GatsbyConf earlier this spring, I talked with Shane, a partner on my squad, about our new Shopify integration. And at that time, we were calling this Shopify integration Gatsby Source Shopify Experimental. We've seen incredible adoption of this new experimental version, and so it's actually in release candidate mode right now. And so there is no more Gatsby Source Shopify Experimental. There's just one source plugin. And so you can access that on NPM with Gatsby Source Shopify at RC, or on GitHub, Gatsby.js /Gatsby Source Shopify. So we're moving fully forward with this new version of the source plugin, and you can expect that this will kind of be merged back into the Gatsby monorepo in the next couple months. But this is, if you're starting a new project or you have an existing site that you're thinking about upgrading, absolutely use this new version of the source plugin. We've seen some awesome sites, which maybe, Dan, we can tweet out on Twitter, sites that are using the new source plugin, but it is so much more stable and performant than the previous version, and we're really excited about it.
Definitely. And just a quick reminder, if you go to shopify-demo.gatsbyjs.com, you'll find our demo stored there. It has, I think, over 30,000 pages on it. You can see how fast and performant it is. You can also check out the repo, get it launched on Gatsby Cloud in just a few clicks. But I think it's an awesome kind of sandbox environment to go check out what is even doable, and then also just to see how well it performs. All right.
I have some more questions if we just want to keep rolling through those.
Yeah, you keep going. Go for it.
Great. Feel free to cut me off if you have some thoughts.
All right.
So someone shared, Contentful is expensive. Are there other CMSs that we can use? And again, kind of like I mentioned earlier, the beauty of Gatsby is that we have support for so many different CMSs. So if you're kind of concerned about cost, something that you might want to look at is WordPress. You can sign up on 2 great hosts that we've seen work really well with Gatsby, our Flywheel and WP Engine. And so, that's a little bit more of an economical option than maybe enterprise headless CMSs. So, spin up a WordPress install and you can absolutely use that for your marketing content alongside Shopify. And, a lot of content editors are also very familiar with WordPress, and so that might even be kind of a better option for them. So you do have a lot of options. There's even self-hosted headless CMSs that might be worth checking out. So Contentful, which we featured in this presentation, isn't the only option, and you can kind of pick and choose based on your budget or client needs.
All right, we'll get 2 more. Pick out your best 2 questions here, Jack.
Yeah. So one question that I really enjoy, because this kind of gets at the heart of the Gatsby plus Shopify integration, is checkout always going to use Shopify? So leading into this sort of next phase of the Gatsby and Shopify partnership and integration, we chatted with users to understand how they were building these sites. And what we heard is that business owners and people that are operating Shopify sites really love the Shopify checkout experience. It autofills customers' information. It supports the latest and greatest payment mechanisms like Shop Pay, Apple Pay, Android Pay, things like that. And it also supports, pay later things like Affirm. And this is a lot of functionality that Shopify provides out of the box. And reverse engineering all of that into your Gatsby site would be quite the challenge. And so it's actually a better user experience, and a lot of the checkout experience is highly automated. And so I kind of foresee for the foreseeable future, for the vast majority of sites that are using Shopify and Gatsby, is they'll hand off the checkout experience to Shopify, again, since it's really good at that. But it means for the performance sensitive parts of your site, for product discovery, things like that, those things are best handled by Gatsby, because that's really what's going to drive conversions and drive users to start that checkout experience. So I guess, I look at using Shopify for the checkout experience as a win, that you don't have to maintain a checkout experience or be always supporting the latest and greatest payment things, or worry about, PCI compliance or things like that if you decide to re-implement, taking payments and things into your site. Ken, was there a last question? I have more questions, but was there one that
I got one last
came to mind for you?
Yeah. there's a couple questions about Shopify apps and kind of the plugin environment there. I think this is like a super important one. It also affects us on WordPress too. It's always interesting. Where do you put the app logic, right? Is it on like the Shopify in the back end, or is it continuing to move forward in a more headless way with the front end? And I think that would be most of our answers here. Are the Shopify apps are really made to work with the entire Shopify like full stack. So when we think about like marketing solutions and some of the promotional activities, like a lot of that would transfer over to your headless stack and start to actually be baked directly into your web experience itself. Do you have any like counter answer to that, or do you feel like that is the direction as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The majority of Shopify apps work great with Gatsby, and anything related to fulfillment or orders or like capturing subscription payments, things like that, all of those, respond to changes to the Shopify data model. So, they're listening for changes to Shopify orders and things like that. And so those will continue to function. As a development team, you're of course re-implementing your product catalog with Gatsby. And if you're doing something like, a product subscription, you'll have to incorporate that into your design as well. But I definitely talk to customers that are, for example, selling subscription products or, auto fulfillment of, I want my shampoo every month automatically. Those are sites that are absolutely, using Shopify apps from the marketplace, but also being built with Gatsby.
Awesome. All right. And then your last question is?
So another one here, just kind of thinking through like, okay, we're moving forward with Shopify and we have some questions. So one question that was in the chat is, what about rebuilds for product quantity? So, with Gatsby, when data changes about your product catalog, you typically rebuild your Gatsby site. So product quantity is, it seems that developers are kind of split on how to handle this. So some developers, maybe for a smaller site that's just selling a few products, every time an order is placed will trigger an update to update the quantity of that product and actually, share that out, with the static files that Gatsby is generating. Other sites will actually do a product quantity check and check to see if that product's available in the front end. I think that's, doing that logic client side, I think makes the most sense to me, right? Because then, you can have, enormous order volume, still get users, up-to-date information about if a product is available or not. Maybe for things like filtering, you want to include an option to filter by in-stock or out-of-stock products. For that, what you might do is kick off a build every hour or every 15 minutes or something other than every time an order is placed. So there's a few different ways you can handle that. And again, what we've sort of seen is that people will check on the front end and then maybe do some regular builds on the back end. And the starter that Dan's demoing right now is a great thing to check out. And I believe it checks on the front end in real time when the visitor is actually adding it to their cart.
Yeah, sorry, I'm clicking around.
It's great.
All right, well, thank you for answering those, Jack. Thank you for also helping out with today. I hope everyone had an awesome, informative talk. We will continue to be launching helpful content around Shopify for the rest of the month. We also have an awesome conference coming up. June 8th, we'll be kind of taking the whole day to show off some of these new things, to talk with some other digital leaders outside of Gatsby as well. So you can check that out at gatsbyjs.com/camp-summer-21. So feel free to sign up for there. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.